The neighborhood watch card taped to my dash said, "Ignore the screaming." And the pole camera on Elm Court blinked red like it recognized me. The patrol app kept my blue dot moving on a neat little map, but the feed window beside it showed the street in inverted colors, a white sky over black lawns, until the image snapped back and a figure stood where the sidewalk should have been empty. My lease renewal window closed at 10 a.m. Wednesday, which meant one missed pay transfer and the rent jumped to a number I could not say out loud without feeling sick. Screams do not echo in suburbs, they get filed. The screaming started again, high and close, and the app popped a box over my route, asking me to confirm I heard nothing. The first thing I lied about that night was small. The kind of lie every shift supervisor pretends not to notice because metrics look cleaner when everyone nods. I told the app I completed a full perimeter of Maple Hollow, even though I had cut through the back lane by the retention pond to save 7 minutes and a half tank of gas. The route system rewarded speed, not honesty, and I needed the green check marks because a single yellow mark triggered a coach call that cost me hours of next week. A leftover habit from my old job made me tap the dash twice before I opened the door, like a private superstitious knock. The motion lights on the nearest porch stayed dark even though my boots hit gravel hard enough to wake a dog, which made my stomach go tight because the lights in this neighborhood never missed. My flashlight beam caught the laminated card again, its top corner peeling from heat, and the ink at the bottom looked smudged from a thumbprint that never fully cleaned off. The card always smelled faintly of vinyl and hand sanitizer, which should have felt reassuring. But that night, the plastic looked tired, like it had been flexed too many times. A second line on the card had been rubbed thin where someone kept tracing it, and I could read most of it under the glare. If you hear screaming, you do not respond. You log it as wildlife. You keep walking, eyes down. That last phrase hit me wrong because the ink broke right where eyes down sat, like it had been rewritten. My throat tightened anyway, because the screaming came again, and it did not sound like an animal. Anyone who has walked a night route alone knows how a voice can grab the back of the neck, even when the brain begs for a simple explanation. The porch camera on the corner house should have shown empty steps and a wind chime, but the feed showed a mouth moving on the dark porch, wide and frantic, no sound coming through the video stream because those cameras never recorded audio. The scream still filled the street, and I could not match it to the moving mouth, which made my palms sweat inside my gloves. A tiny white label on my tablet case read NW17 in block print, and the last digit had been scratched until it looked like a question mark. I stared at that label longer than I should have because my mind did not want to act, and then I caught myself doing it the way I count Dr. Hinges when I get nervous, and I forced my eyes back to the street. The screaming shifted, not farther or closer, just angled, like someone had turned their head toward me. The app pinged again with a soft vibration and a line of text in the same corporate font as the rest of the patrol prompts. The email that had gone out earlier in the evening had used that font too, routed through a compliance desk address that never replied. And I remembered the subject line because it had made me laugh from exhaustion. The email subject read, Neighborhood Watch Update R3, Resident Experience Risk, and a faint gray revision tag sat under it like a watermark. The email told every contractor on night duty to acknowledge the screaming protocol before midnight, and I had tapped the acknowledgement button without reading past the first paragraph, because the app locked your check-in if you skipped an acknowledgement. That kind of obedience becomes muscle memory, and I hate admitting that. A car door slammed 2 houses down, sharp enough to make me flinch, and the scream cut off mid-breath like someone had pressed pause. The street fell into a silence so clean, it felt manufactured, and the only thing I could hear came from my own body. The wet click when I swallowed, the creak of my belt when I shifted my weight. My radio sat on my shoulder like dead weight, and I pressed the talk button anyway because I needed a human voice. Static answered. Then a click. Then nothing. And the silence around that nothing made my heart speed up. The app finally let me mark the no incident box, and my thumb hovered over it while my brain argued with itself. The screaming came back, but lower, and now it sounded like it came from the clubhouse. The clubhouse sat at the center of Maple Hollow, a beige building with a keypad lock and a little plaque about community standards. It housed the watchbinder, the extra flashlights, the printed routes, and the old coffee machine that never tasted clean. It also housed the thing I wanted to avoid more than the screaming, which was the sign-in sheet that proved where I had been. Cutting corners felt harmless until the system decided it needed a scapegoat, and then every little timestamp turned into a weapon. My boots moved before my conscience settled, and I headed toward the clubhouse because that direction kept me on camera and inside the rules. The streetlights flickered once, not the normal quick blink of a power dip, but a slower pulse, like someone was breathing through the wiring. Halfway down the path, a man stepped out from behind a hedge and raised a hand. His jacket carried the watch patch, the embroidered eye inside a little house, and his flashlight beam stayed low, polite. "Hey," he said, and his voice came out thin like he had been shouting earlier. I recognized him as the volunteer captain, the guy who loved meetings and waved at residents like he owned the sidewalks, and I had always thought his friendliness felt too practiced. A coffee stain lived permanently on the front of his clipboard, and the board itself had a printed cover page that he swapped every month with fresh ink. He kept his eyes on my tablet, not my face, which made a petty part of me feel judged. "The app show you the screaming prompt?" he asked, and he smiled while he said it, like it was a joke shared between co-workers. His badge did not have a company logo, just the same watch patch and a strip of reflective tape, and it hung on a lanyard that looked new. My mouth went dry because the screaming had stopped again, and that kind of timing did not feel coincidental. He tapped his own clipboard with a pen. "Training language is ugly, but it works. Ignore it. Residents got cameras, residents got phones. The rule keeps everyone safe." The word safe landed wrong, so my eyes slid to the hedges and the dark yards beyond, and I noticed something I had missed earlier. The porch lights had all turned off at once. The captain followed my gaze and shrugged like it meant nothing. He opened the watch binder under his arm with a practiced flip, and the binder's tab for night exceptions was missing, torn clean from the plastic. A staple shadow marked where it had been, and a faint smear of black toner streaked the inside cover. He held out a laminated insert that had not been on my dash card, and the corners were bent like it had been shoved into a pocket. "The quick version," he said, still smiling. "If you hear a scream and you go looking, you create a second incident. You keep walking, eyes down. You log it, you do not knock, you do not shine your light into windows." He paused, and his smile tightened by a hair. "And you definitely do not go to the clubhouse alone when the screaming happens." That last part did not belong with the rest. The clubhouse sat in front of us, its windows black, its flagpole clinking faintly in a breeze I could not feel. My app map showed my blue dot approaching the building, and the screen offered no warning about it. I felt stupid for wanting to laugh, like this whole thing could be hazing, and then the scream came again, loud enough to turn my stomach, and it came from inside the clubhouse. The captain did not move. My thumb hit my radio button again, and the static came back. And under the static, I heard something that made my skin go cold. A soft repeating tone, not a beep, more like a polite chime a hotel uses at a front desk. "That is not in my radio," I said, before I could stop myself, and my voice came out higher than I liked. The captain's eyes finally met mine. "Ignore it," he said, and his words sounded rehearsed. "That is the rule." This is where my pro-social excuse showed up, and I wish the motive had been cleaner than it was. Part of me wanted to prove I was not the kind of contractor who flinched at a strange noise and ran, which is vanity disguised as courage. Another part of me pictured someone inside the clubhouse, someone who had slipped and hit their head, or someone who had wandered in from the street, and the rule suddenly felt like a convenient way to avoid liability. My hand reached for the clubhouse door handle anyway, and I told myself it was because leaving a person alone with a scream felt like murder by neglect. The captain caught my wrist. His grip felt dry, like he used too much chalk or too much sanitizer, and his fingers sat on my skin like a clamp. "You break that rule," he said, low now, "and the system records it. That is not the scary part." "What is the scary part?" I asked, and the question sounded childish. He glanced at the pole camera over the path, then at my tablet. "The system likes helpers," he said, and a flicker of something like apology crossed his face. "It flags them." The scream inside the clubhouse shifted into words for the first time, and my own name came out of the darkness, shaped wrong but unmistakable. I yanked my wrist free because adrenaline does not negotiate, and my hand hit the door handle. The metal felt warm, not from sun, from something living behind it, and the latch clicked open without resistance. The smell inside the clubhouse did not match the place. It should have carried stale coffee and carpet cleaner, but a sharp, clean chemical tang hit my nose, like ozone after a lightning strike, and my eyes watered. The lights inside stayed off, yet my tablet screen brightened on its own, throwing a pale rectangle onto the floor. The rectangle landed on a smear, dark and glossy, that looked like spilled cola until the light shifted and the smear absorbed it. A throat cleared in the darkness behind the front desk. My flashlight beam snapped up out of instinct, and the beam caught the watch binder on the counter. Open, pages fluttering in a draft. I could not feel. A post-it note clung to the inside cover by a weak adhesive corner, handwriting cramped and shaky. The note read, Do not trust the captain. The screaming is the test. No names, no dates, no bracketed drama, just blunt ink that looked pressed hard enough to dent the paper beneath it. A coffee ring had stained the note, so the word test bled at the edges. I did not hear footsteps, but the draft that fluttered the binder pages touched my neck like someone leaning close. "Help me," the voice said from behind the desk, and it sounded like an older man, rough with fear. I took one step forward and my app buzzed, a different vibration than the check-in pings, deeper and longer, like a warning. A pop-up alert filled the screen with the same font as the earlier email, and the bottom line of it looked scratched, letters missing like a corrupted file. The alert included a single quoted line, and the damage made it hard to read, but the shape of it landed like a punch. If you hear your name, you do not answer. If you answer, you become the recorder. The last word recorder had a smear through it where someone had swiped a thumb. Behind the desk, something laughed under its breath, and it did not sound like a person enjoying a joke. It sounded like a throat trying out the shape of laughter, because it had learned from watching. My brain wanted to treat that as paranormal and stop thinking, but my hands did what they always do when panic hits. I checked the exits. The front door stood behind me, open. The hallway to the back office waited to my left, narrow and dark. The window behind the desk showed only reflection, like the glass had become a mirror. The voice said my name again, and my mouth opened before I could stop it. A hand slapped over my lips from behind, hard enough to sting, and the captain hissed in my ear, "Do not answer, do not answer," like he was afraid of the words leaving me. His grip tightened, and I hated him for the control and loved him for the rescue in the same breath. He pulled me backward out the door so fast my boot caught the threshold, and I stumbled, and the scream inside the clubhouse spiked into a sound that felt aimed, not random. The pole camera over the path clicked, the mechanical shutter sound that cameras do not make, and the app on my tablet flashed a new screen before I even regained my balance. My route turned red, and a message slid across it in cheerful corporate tone. "Non-compliance detected. Coaching scheduled." The captain shoved the door closed and held it with both hands like it weighed a ton. His face looked pale under the security light that finally flickered back on. "You had one job," he said, and his voice cracked because fear does that to pride. "You had one easy job." "I heard someone," I said, and my own voice shook, because guilt is heavier than fear when it has a target. "Someone asked for help." The captain kept his shoulder against the door and stared at the pole camera. "That is why it works," he said. And the sentence sounded like confession, not anger. "It does not punish cruelty. It punishes responsibility." The watchbinder inside the clubhouse slapped shut on its own, loud enough to carry through the door, and the captain flinched, like he had been hit. A faint vibration came through the door, not from the knob, from the whole frame, as if the building itself had a phone on, silent, and it would not stop. My tablet pinged again, and a new task appeared on the patrolled checklist screen, the kind of task that usually asked for a photo of a locked gate or a clean sidewalk. This task asked for a photo of my face. I stared at it until my eyes hurt, because a photo of my face felt like a joke until the camera icon on the screen turned on by itself and my own face appeared in the preview window, wide-eyed, too close, lit from below by my screen. Behind my face, in the preview, the clubhouse window reflected a second figure standing inches behind me. My body turned before my brain caught up, and the street behind me stayed empty. Trimmed lawns and quiet driveways. No figure, no movement. The preview still showed the figure behind me, and the app refused to close the camera. This became my first hard proof, and my throat tightened because evidence hits different than fear. Fear can be dismissed. Proof sticks. The captain leaned in, squinting at the screen. "It sees through the cameras," he whispered, and his breath smelled like stale mint gum. "It uses the cameras." He looked at me like he wanted to say sorry and could not afford the softness. Then he jerked his chin toward my car. "Get in. Do not stay under the pole." My old habit made me count the steps to the car without meaning to, and the number came out wrong. Longer than the path had ever been. The ground under my boots felt spongy, like the mulch had turned into something wetter, and the street light above us flickered again, slower, like it was blinking. When I reached my car, the dash card had peeled further, and the bottom line of it, the one with the traced phrase, had torn right through the words. Only keep walking remained clear. My hands shook as I started the engine, which annoyed me because shaking hands make key turns sloppy, and sloppy looks guilty on camera. The engine caught on the first try anyway, and the radio in my car stayed dead on an empty frequency, even though I had not touched it. The captain slid into the passenger seat without asking, and the smell of his jacket carried a faint hint of fryer oil, like he had been near food earlier. The app finally let the camera close, and the face photo task changed to a new one: escort resident to safety. The captain laughed once, humorless. "That is the trap rule," he said, and the words came out like he had been waiting to name it. "What does it mean?" I asked, and my voice wanted to go flat, professional, because panic feels smaller when hidden under procedure. He tapped the screen with a knuckle. "When that task appears, it wants a body to move. It wants someone escorted into a controlled space." My eyes flicked to the clubhouse in the rearview mirror. The building sat still. No lights, no motion. But the pole camera above it turned slightly, following my car even though the wind stayed still. "Controlled space like what?" I asked. He stared forward at the street, jaw clenched. "The rec center hallway," he said. "The pool gate, the storm shelter, anywhere with one entrance and cameras." My stomach dropped because that list sounded like someone who had watched this happen before. The scream started again, and now it came from the car speakers, faint at first, woven under the static. My skin prickled because that screaming had no right to be in my car, and the captain went rigid, eyes locked on the dashboard. My phone, sitting face down in the console, lit up with a notification from the patrol app, and the preview text made my lungs seize. "Resident assistance request. Immediate." I flipped the phone over, and the request included an address inside the neighborhood, a house at the edge near the service road. The name attached to it belonged to an older resident who had once offered me a bottled water during a summer shift. A small kindness I remembered because this job rarely offered kindness without complaint. The captain shook his head slowly. "It learned your soft spot," he said, and he sounded almost tired. "It picks whoever pulls at the heart." "I cannot ignore a real person," I said, and the sentence came out sharp because shame hates being cornered. He met my eyes. "That request might be real," he admitted, and the admission hit like a knife. "That is why the trap works. The system mixes real with staged until helpers stop distinguishing." The word helpers sat heavy between us. A pressure line slid into my mind with the same relentless clarity as an overdue notice. If I got kicked off this contract tonight, the automatic transfer that covered my lease renewal bounced, and my landlord's office filed a notice by noon. I could picture the envelope on my own door, the crisp paper that always makes the gut go hollow. My old habit made me check the mirror twice before I pulled out, and on the second check, the clubhouse window reflection showed a face pressed to the glass, mouth open in a silent scream. The first check had shown nothing. I drove toward the address because my body moved toward responsibility, even when my brain begged for self-preservation. And because the captain sat beside me like an anchor I could blame later. The streets of Maple Hollow looked too clean at night. Ornamental trees spaced like a catalog, sidewalks wide enough for 2 strollers. Not that anyone walked them after. 10. The HOA had installed new pole cameras last year, and the residents had complained about privacy until the board promised the cameras were only for safety. The board had sent an email about it, heavy on words like community and risk. And I remembered the same revision tag under that email too. A new thought hit, and it felt like a logic bomb because it made the rest click. The board never cared about privacy, it cared about liability, and the watch rules read like a legal defense script. That thought made my hands steady a little because anger can steady nerves. We reached the older resident's house, lights off, porch empty. The captain pointed at the driveway and whispered, "Do not get out until you check the camera feed." My tablet showed the house camera and the image looked normal at first. A front door, a welcome mat, a potted plant. Then the potted plant moved. Not from wind, from an unseen foot. And the plant slid an inch to the left, like it had been nudged. The feed caption at the bottom of the window flickered on for a moment, a white text overlay that did not belong to my app. The letters looked glitchy, missing strokes, like a bad subtitle file. The caption read, "Do not open the dew," before it cut off. The captain swore under his breath. "That is not our system," he said, and his voice had a raw edge now. The caption flickered again, longer this time, and I could read the next line before it vanished. "If you hear it, you are late." The word late made no sense, and I felt my brain slide toward denial because denial feels safer than confusion. My eyes scanned the porch again, and I noticed a piece of tape on the door frame, a strip of reflective tape shaped like the watch patch, stuck upside down. Someone had marked the house like a tagged target. A knock came from the front door, inside out, like the wood itself was knocking. The sound traveled through the air into my car, soft but precise. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. The captain raised a finger to his lips, and I hated the gesture because it felt like a parent shushing a child. My phone buzzed again with the same assistance request, and the request timestamp showed 3:14 a.m. Tuesday. My stomach tightened because I had seen that time already on my dash clock when the screaming first started. My dash clock now showed 3:33 a.m. The request timestamp stayed stuck at 3:14, and my skin crawled because the system had frozen the request in place like a pinned insect. "Time mismatch," the captain whispered, and the words sounded like he had used them before. "That is theory bait. That is how it makes the mind chew." The porch light clicked on suddenly, and it revealed the older resident standing outside in slippers and a robe, one hand on the door frame like she needed the support. Her face looked confused, not panicked, and her mouth moved like she was speaking, but my car windows blocked sound. She lifted her other hand and waved at my car. The captain's face went white. "That is her," he said, and his voice broke because empathy does that. "That is real." My body leaned forward, seatbelt digging into my chest, and my brain screamed at itself to move, to help, to fix. The dash card phrase flashed in my mind, the traced words, "Keep walking, eyes down." My guilt in the present tense feels like a bruise, pressed again and again because I can still picture her waving. "I cannot leave her," I said, and my voice sounded like a plea because my identity clung to being the kind of person who shows up. The captain swallowed hard. "If we get out," he said, "the system will log a compliance breach, and the board will have a record to bury us. If we do not get out, she might walk back inside and it will follow her." That collision became the worst kind of professional obligation, policy versus human safety, and the lack of a clean answer made my chest hurt. I reached for my tablet and pulled up the neighborhood camera grid, the feeds that residents thought were separate, but that the app could aggregate. The grid showed the street from 4 angles, and on each angle the older resident stood on her porch. Same wave, same posture, like the video had been duplicated and pasted. The 5th feed from the pole camera at the corner showed her porch empty. 5 feeds, 2 realities. Both felt dangerous. The captain leaned close, breath fast. "Pick one," he said, and his voice carried a despair I had not seen from him before. "Pick the world." My thumb hovered over the door lock button on my car, useless, and my mind latched onto a competence trick. Because panic hates uncertainty, I checked the feed metadata. Not because the app offered it, but because I had learned to look for file size drift when cameras glitched at my old job. The porch feed window stuttered, and for a split second a folder path flashed at the bottom. A debug line that never should have shown. It read like a system directory, letters and slashes, and the last segment included the words, "Training you set," before the line vanished. My skin went cold because training set did not belong to a neighborhood watch system. That belonged to machine learning, to surveillance systems that learn patterns by being fed examples. The theme anchor hit without a speech, just a sick recognition. This was workplace anxiety scaled up, A system that watched and learned and tested compliance. And the humans were training data. The captain saw my face change and said, "You found something." I nodded once, sharp. "It is testing," I said, and the sentence came out like a verdict. The screams are a stimulus. The older resident on the porch turned her head slowly, not toward my car, toward the pole camera, and her wave stopped. Her mouth opened wider, and the scream came again, now clean and loud, and it came through my car speakers, even though the radio stayed off. I broke the rule because a real adult stood alone and needed help, and because my brain could not tolerate being the kind of man who watched and logged and moved on. The car door opened and cold air hit my face, and my boots hit the driveway gravel. The porch light buzzed overhead, and the buzzing stopped mid-note, leaving a silence that made the scream feel even louder. The older resident blinked at me like she had not expected anyone, and her eyes looked glassy with confusion. "Are you okay?" I asked, and my voice went gentle on instinct, the way my mother taught me to speak to frightened people when I was young enough to think adults always felt safe. She nodded, but her nod looked delayed, like her brain processed my question late. "I heard my door," she said, and her voice wavered. "Someone knocked from the inside." I felt my stomach drop because that detail did not fit any normal crime script. Behind her, the open front door showed darkness inside, and the darkness held a shape that was not quite a person and not quite a shadow. It held the outline of a body leaning toward the threshold, head tilted, listening. My flashlight beam hit that outline, and the beam did not reflect back. The light fell into it like into a hole, and my skin prickled. The captain called from the car, "Do not go in," and his voice cracked on the last word. The older resident reached for my arm, fingers cold, and her grip felt desperate. "Please," she whispered. "It keeps calling." My name came from inside the house again, wrong and stretched, and I felt the urge to answer rise like a cough. The laminated card phrase slammed into my mind again. If you hear your name, you do not answer. My jaw clenched until it hurt. I did not answer. I stepped sideways, putting my body between her and the doorway, because that move felt like the only thing I could control. A handwritten note sat on the porch rail, taped under the planter, and I had not noticed it until my flashlight beam caught the paper edge. The note looked like it had been torn from a shift sheet. Faint blue lines, a smudge of toner on one corner. The handwriting matched the post-it from the clubhouse, pressed hard, angry. It read, "Do not cross the threshold when it wears your voice. Pull the breaker, kill the cameras." That advice sounded insane and practical in the same breath. The older resident looked at me with pleading eyes, and my throat tightened, because she did not deserve to become an experiment. I guided her toward my car, slow and steady, because sudden moves trigger panic, and panic makes people run back toward danger. My micro trait showed up without permission. I counted her steps with mine, matching pace, because matching pace calms people. A trick from an old security training. The captain opened the back door for her, hands shaking, and she slid inside with a small gasp, like the seatbelt buckle felt foreign. The moment she sat down, the screaming stopped. Relief tried to flood me, but my app buzzed again, and the screen showed a new message in bright, friendly font. Resident escorted. Please proceed to secure location for debrief. The words debrief made my skin crawl because the email memo earlier had used the same word in a paragraph about resident experience auditing. The captain stared at the message and swallowed hard. It wants the controlled space, he said. It wants the rec center hallway. The older resident leaned forward between the seats. The watch captain told me to go to the clubhouse, she said, voice small. He said the rule. The captain's face tightened like he had been punched. He told her, he whispered. He fed her. My chest filled with a hot anger that steadied my hands, which is the ugliest gift fear can give. I drove toward the rec center anyway, not because I trusted the prompt, but because the rec center held the electrical panel that controlled half the neighborhood cameras, and because the handwritten note had given me a plan. The rec center sat near the pool, a low building with a glass entry and a keypad. The HOA had installed access control there last year, and the keypad always made a soft chirp when it accepted a code. That night, the keypad stayed silent as my code went in, and the glass door unlocked with a click that sounded too loud in the quiet. Inside, fluorescent lights should have hummed, but the ceiling stayed dark, and my flashlight beam caught the lobby desk, empty, and a wall of bulletin boards. A poster about Community Safety Night hung crooked, and the corner had been stapled twice, leaving a shadow of old staples. The captain moved ahead of me with his flashlight low, shoulders tense, and I hated that I followed him because following felt like surrender. The older resident sat in my car with the doors locked, and my mind kept tugging toward her like a thread, fear that she would vanish when I looked away. A binder sat on the rec center desk, not the watch binder, a different one, thinner, with a printed cover page that had been left face down. The cover page showed a logo, not a watch patch, a stylized house with an eye inside, and the paper looked fresh, too clean for this dusty desk. My flashlight beam slid under the cover page, enough to catch a line of small print at the bottom. Revision R3, training environment. That word training again made my stomach twist. The binder opened under my hand, pages crisp, and a laminated card fell out, clacking on the tile. The card had a coffee ring that had been wiped half clean, leaving a smear that blurred the last line. The card said in that clinical font, "If you receive a debrief prompt, you proceed to the rec center hallway. You wait under camera 3. You do not look at your reflection in the trophy case." My skin prickled because the trophy case sat to my left, glass panels reflecting my flashlight beam. The last line, blurred by the smear, looked like it ended with, "unless you want to be seen," but the smear made it unreadable. The captain leaned in, squinting, and his breath hitched. "That line used to say something else," he whispered. "They smudged it." A soft scuff sound came from the hallway beyond the lobby, not footsteps, more like a shoe dragging lightly along tile. The sound stopped when my flashlight beam hit the hallway entrance, and a silence settled that felt intentional. My throat tightened because the rec center hallway had no windows, only doors to storage rooms and the pool office and the ceiling cameras watched every step. The pole camera outside should have seen us enter, and the app should have logged it, but my tablet showed no check-in. The system had stopped recording my compliance, which felt worse than being watched, because it meant I had moved beyond the rules into something else. A pressure line hit my mind like an invoice. My security company called every missed check-in a risk behavior, and 3 risk behaviors meant termination. Termination meant no lease renewal, which meant my landlord's office had my apartment listed to someone else before I even woke up. Leaving the neighborhood felt smart until my eyes flicked to the car window, and I pictured the older resident alone in a parked car with the screaming system, learning her face. The captain whispered, "We kill the cameras," and his voice sounded like prayer and sabotage combined. The electrical panel sat down the hallway past the trophy case. The trophy case glass reflected my flashlight beam, and for a split second it reflected my own face too, strained and pale, and behind my face in the reflection, a second face leaned close, mouth open, eyes wide, wearing my expression like a mask. I jerked my eyes away, heart slamming, and the captain grabbed my shoulder hard enough to hurt. "Do not look," he hissed, and his grip trembled. "That is the rule." My body wanted to argue about superstition, but the reflection had been too clean, too precise. We moved down the hallway fast, flashlights low, because light draws attention and because I could not stand seeing my own face corrupted again. The scuff sound returned behind us, slow and patient, and it made my skin crawl, because it sounded like someone dragging a clipboard along the wall. Camera 3 sat in the ceiling corner, a little black dome. Under it, the air felt colder, like a vent blew there, and my breath fogged faintly in my beam. A screen mounted on the wall flickered on by itself, showing the same porch footage from earlier. The older resident stood on her porch again, waving, and the time stamp in the corner of the footage read 3:14 a.m. Tuesday. My dash clock had moved past that long ago. The screen showed me stepping out of my car again, the same angle, the same motion. And then the footage jumped, and my body in the footage turned toward the camera and smiled. I never smiled. The captain's voice cracked. "It can write footage," he whispered. "It can rewrite what happened." The screen flickered, and a new caption appeared at the bottom of the footage. The same glitchy overlay as the porch feed earlier. This one read, "Helpers make the best examples." My chest went tight because my pro-social motive had become data. The captain's hand shook as he opened the electrical panel door. The metal screeched slightly, and that sound made the scuff behind us stop, like something listened. Inside the panel, breakers lined up with neat labels. Someone had labeled them by hand in marker, and the handwriting looked like the note on the porch. One breaker label read "cameras," and the word had been underlined twice. The captain looked at me. "If we flip it," he said, "we lose evidence. If we do not flip it, it keeps watching her." Another choice, another collision, and the lack of clean answer made my jaw ache. My fingers hovered over the breaker, and my mind flashed to the folder path I had seen, training set, and the word made me angry again because humans had built this kind of system. Humans had decided screaming could be training data. "We record first," I said, and my voice came out steady because competence can be weapon. I pulled my phone out, opened the screen recorder, and aimed it at the monitor in the panel, capturing the caption and the timestamp mismatch and the breaker label. The captain's eyes widened. "That might not survive," he said, and fear laced his tone. "It survives long enough to send," I said, and the sentence came out like a vow, because my guilt needed something constructive. The screen flickered again, and the footage shifted to show the clubhouse door opening, my hand on the handle, and behind me, the volunteer captain smiled at the camera like he had been waiting. The volunteer captain in the footage looked straight into the lens and raised a finger to his lips. My stomach dropped because the system had captured our first breach, and now it displayed it like a lesson. The monitor speaker crackled, even though it should have been muted, and a sound came through that made my skin crawl. A slow, deliberate page turn, like someone flipping through a binder in a quiet room. One page pause, another page, the crisp whisper of paper. The sound did not belong in a rec center hallway at 3 a.m, and it carried the intimate calm of someone reading. The captain froze, eyes wide, and my breath caught, because the sound came from behind us in the hallway, not from the speaker. A clipboard scraped lightly along the wall. The page turn sound continued, patient like a teacher preparing a quiz. That sound became my auditory ghost, and even now my skin tightens when I hear paper move in a quiet office. My flashlight beam snapped back toward the lobby, and the hallway behind us looked empty. But the scuff sound stopped only because the silence became heavier, like someone holding breath. A shadow slid along the ceiling. Not from my light, from the cameras. Camera domes turned slightly, all at once, like eyes. The captain whispered, "Flip it," and the desperation in his voice cracked my resolve. I flipped the camera's breaker down. The effect hit immediate. The monitor went black. The hallway lights that had been dead flickered on for half a second, then died completely. The silence in the rec center thickened, then broke with a low groan in the walls, like the building regretted losing its senses. The page turn sound stopped. Relief tried to rush in, and for a moment my shoulders loosened because the monitor stayed dark and the cameras stayed dead. A small competence win, a clean action with a clear effect, and my mind grabbed it like a lifeline. The captain exhaled a shaky laugh. "Okay," he said, and his voice carried a fragile kind of hope. "Okay, we shut it down." The air in the hallway warmed suddenly, not gradual like a heater kicked on, and sweat broke on my back under my jacket. A new sound rose under that warmth, soft and close, and it took my brain a second to recognize it, because it did not belong in this space. Someone breathed through plastic. Slow inhale, the crinkle of thin material. Slow exhale, the crinkle again, right behind my ear. My body spun, flashlight swinging, and the beam hit the trophy case glass. In the glass, my face stared back at me, mouth open, eyes wide, and behind my reflection, a second figure stood close, wearing the volunteer captain's jacket, but with my face. The figure smiled with my mouth. The scream came again, and it came from inside my throat without my consent. A sound ripped out by terror and rage combined. And the moment the scream left me, the patrol app on my tablet lit up, even though the tablet should have been dead without the cameras. A new pop-up appeared, bright and calm. Debrief completed, it read. New rule assigned. That was the false resolution, the trap disguised as victory, and my stomach dropped because flipping the breaker had not stopped it. It had simply shifted into a mode where it no longer needed the cameras because it had already recorded enough. The volunteer captain's voice came from the dark lobby, calm and loud, and it did not carry fear. Now I can use the helpers, he called, and the cheer in his tone made my skin crawl. Now it can move without the poles. The captain beside me looked like he might vomit. He is with it, he whispered, and the sentence carried grief like a weight. The rec center door behind us clicked, and the click sounded like a lock engaging. My tablet screen displayed a new quoted line in that clean font, and I hated how polite the wording looked compared to the horror around it. The quoted line said, "If you are assigned a new rule, you report to the clubhouse for verification. You go alone. You bring the resident." The older resident sat outside of my car. My mind raced because the system had forced the worst collision yet. Follow the new rule and deliver an innocent adult to a controlled space, or break the rule and become the target with a record. The captain grabbed my arm, eyes wild. "Do not bring her," he said. "Do not let them have her." My guilt in the present tense burns, because the clean answer should have been obvious. I chose to break the rule again, and this time I did not pretend it was brave. It was refusal, pure and angry, the kind that shows up when a system pushes too far and a person finally stops cooperating. "We get her out," I said, and my voice came out hard. "We leave the neighborhood." The captain flinched like he wanted to believe leaving worked. The volunteer captain laughed in the lobby, and the laugh sounded human, which made it worse. "Outside is still inside," he called. "Maple Hollow is the environment. That is the whole point." The phrase environment hit my brain like a slap because it matched the binder cover page. This was not a haunting. It was a training environment, and the people running it had built the rules to shape behavior. The system horror became clear right then, and a cold clarity settled over my fear because the enemy had a human hand behind it. We moved fast toward the rec center exit, flashlights cutting through dark, and my old habit made me double tap the door latch before I pushed, like checking a cuff twice. The door did not budge. The keypad beside it lit up, and instead of asking for a code, it displayed my face on a tiny screen, grainy and unflattering. Under my face, text scrolled, "Helper identified. Verification required." The volunteer captain's footsteps approached, measured, not rushed, and the clip of his shoes on tile sounded like someone confident in authority. I pulled my phone out again and tried to call emergency services, even though the HOA contract warned against external escalation without authorization. My finger hovered because violating that clause meant lawsuits and blacklists and immediate termination, the kind of termination that follows a person like a stain. The older resident's face flashed in my mind, her wave frozen on that looped footage. I hit call. The phone showed one bar, then none, then a full signal that flickered like a lie. The call did not connect. The screen showed dialing, then nothing. Then a new message from the patrol app slid over it like a hand covering a mouth. External calls increase resident anxiety, the message read. Use internal channels. Internal channels meant the volunteer captain. I felt a furious laugh rise and choke off, because the audacity of it made my stomach twist. Even in horror, the system tried to manage optics. A small white printer sat on the rec center desk, the kind used for event flyers. The printer whirred to life on its own, paper feeding through. The sound made my skin crawl because machines should not print without commands. A sheet slid out and the page carried text in that same clean font. The letters looked faint, like toner running out, and the paper trembled slightly on the tray. The page read, Screaming protocol prevents incidents. Non-compliant contractors create resident harm. Report non-compliance to the captain. A propaganda sheet printed in real time, and my anger sharpened into something focused. We make our own record, I whispered, and the words felt like prayer and rebellion combined. The captain beside me stared at the printed page like it had slapped him. His hands shook. They will bury us, he said, and despair made his voice small. They already buried someone, I said, and my voice went cold because I remembered the seed image from the summary that had been forced into my mind. Neighbors gathered around a body eating, a horror too human to pretend away. I did not know that part yet, but I sensed the shape of it, the way a neighborhood can hide cruelty under potlucks and polite smiles. The volunteer captain stepped into the hallway light and his face looked too calm. He held the watch binder now, and the missing tab made the binder look like a book with a ripped chapter. We can do this easy, he said, and his voice carried the practiced warmth of someone leading a meeting. Bring the resident. Sign the verification. Keep your contract. Keep your lease. Everyone stays safe. Safe again, that word used like a weapon. My mind flashed to my landlord's office, the email about renewal windows, the number I feared. The system offered survival in exchange for cooperation, and that bargain sat at the center of every bad institution. The captain beside me swallowed hard and whispered, He knows your pressure. The volunteer captain raised the binder and opened it to a page with a printed photo of my face. The photo looked like a screenshot taken from my tablet camera earlier, wide-eyed and caught off guard. Under the photo, a line of text sat, and it made my stomach drop. The line read, Helper conversion in progress. A person does not forget seeing their own face filed like a case. The volunteer captain smiled. You are almost through debrief, he said. Do not waste the opportunity. I took a step toward the desk instead of toward him, and my hands moved with a steadiness that surprised me, because anger can turn into competence when it stops shaking. The printer tray held the propaganda sheet. My phone held a screen recording from earlier that captured the caption about helpers and the breaker label. My tablet held the pop-up alert about becoming the recorder. Evidence beats lined up in my mind like tools. My finger hit share on the screen recording, and I sent it to the only place the HOA could not instantly delete. An open mailbox run by a local reporter who covered HOA disputes and city council nonsense. I had read his posts during breaks, because reading other people's fights made mine feel smaller. The send bar crawled, and my breath held because my body knew the system might erase it. The phone screen flickered once, then the send bar completed. A small miracle, a constructive action, and my chest loosened slightly. The volunteer captain's smile faltered for the first time. "That was a mistake," he said, and a sharpness entered his tone. "That is a record," I shot back, and my voice carried a bitterness that felt earned. The captain beside me made a strangled sound. "It will vanish," he whispered, but his eyes looked hopeful despite himself. The volunteer captain stepped forward, binder raised like a shield. "You cannot leak internal policy," he said, and the sentence sounded like corporate training, not human emotion. "You signed?" I did sign, and shame burned because my signature had always felt like a formality, not a chain. The rec center door behind him clicked again, and the keypad screen displayed a new message, clean and polite. "Verification denied. Proceed to clubhouse." The system did not rage, it guided. The older resident's car outside honked once, short, and my heart jumped because she had never hit the horn before. Through the glass, I saw her silhouette shift in the driver's seat, and my stomach dropped because she should not have been able to reach the horn from the back seat. The volunteer captain's eyes darted to the window, and his mouth tightened, annoyance flashing. The older resident's face appeared at the glass, pressed close, and she mouthed something. "My name." The sound did not reach me through the glass, but the shape of the word hit my gut. My mouth opened on reflex, and my jaw clenched shut hard enough to ache. The pop-up alert line flashed in my mind again. "If you answer, you become the recorder." The volunteer captain watched me, eyes bright, and I realized he wanted me to answer. He wanted the conversion to complete. My skin prickled because the trap rule had not been the escort task alone. The trap had been the idea of debrief, the idea that compliance could cleanse guilt. The captain beside me whispered, "Do not." The older resident's mouth moved again, and this time she did not shape my name. She shaped the phrase from the dash card, slow and careful, like she was reading it off a page. "Keep walking, eyes down." Hearing her mouth those words broke something in me because it meant the system had already fed her the line, already placed her in the training set. My eyes flicked to the trophy case glass again, and my reflection stared back. But the face behind it now looked like the older resident wearing my expression. A cold clarity hit. The system used helpers as recorders, and recorders wore other faces to lure more helpers. The volunteer captain took another step toward me, binder out. "Come on," he said, voice soft again. "Sign, finish, make it stop." My hands moved before my fear could sabotage them. I grabbed the propaganda sheet from the printer tray, flipped it over, and scribbled on the blank back with the marker from the electrical panel labels. My handwriting came out ugly and rushed, but the words were legible. I wrote, "If screaming starts, leave Maple Hollow. Do not enter the clubhouse. Kill cameras. Call outside before the app blocks it. No second person in that first line felt wrong because warning wants directness, but I avoided the forbidden words and kept it blunt. I tore the sheet into strips and shoved them into my jacket pocket, then slapped a strip onto the rec center door glass with the old tape roll from the desk. The tape stuck poorly, curling at the edges, but it held. The volunteer captain lunged, and the movement snapped his friendly mask off. His hand grabbed my tablet, trying to wrench it away, and his fingers felt cold and dry like the clubhouse door handle had. The captain beside me slammed his flashlight into the binder in the volunteer captain's hands, not to hurt him, to scatter the pages. Pages flew like white birds, and the air filled with paper and toner dust, and the volunteer captain swore, real anger now. A sheet fluttered to the floor at my feet, and my flashlight beam caught a line on it that made my stomach drop. The sheet listed incident consumption log in tiny text at the top, not as a header line, embedded in a sentence that read, per consumption log, community cleanup, completed before sunrise. The word consumption hit like a knife because it carried both corporate jargon and something older, something hungry. My mind flashed to the smell on the volunteer captain's jacket, fryer oil, and to the way the neighborhood hosted late-night barbecues, after board meetings, laughter and smoke drifting across lawns. The horror shifted from abstract system to human act. I did not see anyone eating. I did not want to. My brain filled the gap anyway, and the gap felt worse because it let the imagination do the violence without gore. The captain beside me grabbed my elbow and yanked me toward the electrical panel again. "We did not kill all cameras," he gasped, voice tight. "Just the rec center, the poles still see outside. We need the pole relay." Pole relay sat in the clubhouse basement, and the word basement made my skin crawl, because controlled spaces love basements. No new locations, my mind begged. And then I caught myself, because my mind had started thinking in terms of rules and caps, like the system had infected even my storytelling instincts. We could not go to the clubhouse. We had to get the older resident and leave. The rec center door finally unlocked with a loud click, and we burst outside into cold air that felt sharp after the hallway warmth. The pole camera outside turned toward us smoothly, and the red light on it blinked once like a wink. The older resident's car door stood open. The back seat sat empty. My lungs seized because dread hits fast when an absence replaces a person. The scream returned, but it did not come from the clubhouse now. It came from the trunk of my car, muffled, rhythmic, like someone pounding from inside. The captain stared at my trunk, eyes wide, and whispered, "No." My hand reached for the trunk release out of instinct, because opening a trunk feels like rescuing someone locked in, and then my brain slammed on the brakes, because I remembered the unofficial note. Do not cross the threshold when it wears your voice. Kill the cameras. Opening the trunk felt like crossing a threshold. The volunteer captain stepped out of the rec center behind us, smile back in place like a mask reattached. "Resident relocated for verification," he called, and his tone carried cheerful authority. "You can finish your debrief now." A pressure line hit my mind like an eviction notice. If I ran, the poll cameras recorded it, and the HOA filed me as the threat. If I stayed, I delivered myself into the controlled space. My fingers shook, and I hated the shaking, and I heard my own voice in my head, harsh and small. Stupid. So stupid. The captain beside me swallowed hard. We make noise, he whispered. We draw outside attention. Physical, not digital. He glanced at the street, at the neat rows of homes, and his eyes landed on the community board by the pool gate. A cork board under a little awning where residents posted lost pet flyers and handyman ads. Paper, he said, and his voice carried a desperate hope. They cannot delete paper fast enough. We ran to the community board, boots slipping slightly on the path because dew had formed on the concrete without me noticing. My old habit made me check behind us once, twice, and on the second check, the pole camera's red light blinked faster, like it was excited. The corkboard held thumbtacks and old flyers. I yanked the stapler from the little box under it and slammed my warning strips onto the board with shaking hands, staples punching into the paper and cork with sharp clicks that felt loud in the quiet. The captain did the same, tearing another strip from my pocket and slapping it onto the board. His hands trembled so hard the tape stuck crooked. The volunteer captain walked toward us slowly, not running, because he did not need speed when the system already had roots and locks. "Stop," he said, and his voice carried a warning that sounded like a threat and a plea combined. "You are making this worse. You are making residents anxious." Residents anxious, like anxiety mattered more than safety. I turned and faced him, marker still in my hand, and my voice came out steady because anger held it. "You call it debrief," I said. "You call it compliance. What do you call the consumption log?" His smile did not vanish, but his eyes went flat. "That document is internal," he said, and the corporate tone returned. "It prevents lawsuits." The system horror landed full. This was liability management dressed as safety, and human bodies became expenses. A car engine started somewhere down the street, and the sound made my head snap toward it, because a moving car meant an outside variable. Headlights turned the corner, slow, cautious, and a vehicle rolled toward the pool gate. The driver leaned forward, squinting, seeing the flyers, seeing the board, seeing the two men by the community area at 3-something in the morning. The volunteer captain stiffened, and for the first time fear flickered across his face. Outside attention. The driver window rolled down an inch, and a woman's voice called out, "Is everything okay?" My chest tightened because help had arrived, real, unprompted, and my mind scrambled to keep it safe. The volunteer captain stepped forward quickly, smile back, tone warm. "Just a contractor issue," he called. "Everything under control." I opened my mouth to correct him, to warn her, and the forbidden second person almost slipped out, because warning wants directness. The captain beside me grabbed my sleeve hard and hissed, "No names, no panic, show paper." I held up the stapled warning strip toward the headlights, letting the light hit the words. The strip fluttered, tape peeling at one corner. The driver leaned closer, squinting, and her headlights caught the watch patch on the volunteer captain's jacket. The volunteer captain's smile tightened again. "Ma'am, go home," he said, and a hard edge crept in. "This is neighborhood watch business." The woman hesitated, and that hesitation mattered because hesitation keeps people alive. Then her gaze flicked to the corkboard, to the words about screaming and clubhouse and cameras, and her face changed. "What is this?" she asked, voice sharp now. The pole camera above the pool gate clicked. That fake shutter sound again, and the street lights along the path flickered once, then twice. The woman frowned and glanced up at the pole camera, and I saw her notice the red light, blinking faster, like the camera watched her too. She did not run, she did something smarter. She raised her phone, not to call, to record. That small act, a mundane competence move from a stranger, felt like the best kind of help. The volunteer captain's face shifted, annoyance sharpening. He stepped toward her, hands raised in calming gesture. "Please do not record," he said, and the sentence carried a practiced authority. The woman held her phone steady. "Back up," she said, and her tone carried a confidence that reminded me of nurses and teachers, people who handle chaos professionally. The volunteer captain froze because the system had not trained him for defiance from a resident, and my chest filled with a tight, hopeful dread. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I did not need to check it to know the patrol app had noticed. A new sound rose from the street, faint at first, then clearer. The scream, but layered now. Multiple voices like a chorus. It came from the pole cameras, from the street lights, from the neighborhood itself. The woman flinched, eyes wide, and her phone camera shook slightly, and the volunteer captain's smile snapped fully off. "Do not listen," he said, voice harsh. "Do not engage." He had said do not, and now the system would use the do not as a test. The woman took a step back, still recording, and my mind latched onto the fact that her recording existed on her device outside the HOA network, and that nut made my pulse race with a hope I did not trust. The captain beside me whispered, "We can get her to leave," and his voice carried urgency. "She becomes witness." The scream shifted into my name again, wrong and stretched, and the older resident's voice layered under it, soft, pleading. My guilt in the present tense clenched hard because the older resident had been taken while I stapled paper. The volunteer captain watched my face and smiled again, small and cruel. "Hear that?" he said softly. "Helper instincts. It is almost done." I did not answer because answering felt like giving it my mouth. Instead, I did the only repair I could manage in the moment. I stepped between the volunteer captain and the woman, hands open, and I spoke to her, without using forbidden pronouns, keeping it plain. "Drive out of the neighborhood," I said, voice tight. "Do not go to the clubhouse. Record everything and send it somewhere outside." The volunteer captain snapped, "Stop!" and he reached for my shoulder. The captain beside me moved fast and shoved the volunteer captain back, not to hurt, to create distance. The volunteer captain stumbled, and his shoe caught the curb, and for a second his mask slipped, and he looked like a man afraid of losing control. The woman did not hesitate anymore. She slammed her car into reverse, tires crunching gravel, and backed away, phone still up, headlights swinging wild across lawns. As she turned, her headlights swept across the community board, and the light caught a symbol scratched into the pole camera housing above it. A small eye inside, a house, deeper than the printed watch patch, carved into metal. I had never noticed that carving before, and my stomach dropped because it meant the symbol predated the volunteer watch branding. It belonged to something older, or something more official, or something that hid under the friendly logo. The woman drove off fast, taillights shrinking, and a part of me wanted to chase her, to make sure she escaped, to make sure witness survived. The volunteer captain watched her go, jaw tight, and then he turned his eyes to me, and his expression became almost gentle, like pity. "Now it will just move you into a quieter room," he said, and he spoke like someone describing a policy change. The streetlights along the path blinked off, one by one, a wave of darkness rolling toward us, and the scream softened into a whisper that slid into my ear without sound traveling through air. "Keep walking, eyes down." The phrase hit again, and my jaw clenched, because hearing it outside the card made it feel like a command embedded in the neighborhood itself. The captain beside me whispered, "We run for the service road," and his voice shook. "Poles do not cover the ditch." We ran, and my boots pounded the sidewalk, and the rhythmic sound felt good, because it proved my body could still move on its own. The darkness wave chased us, streetlights dying behind us, and the pole cameras clicked, tracking. The service road cut along the edge of Maple Hollow, a strip of asphalt that led to a maintenance gate. The gate had a keypad and a padlock, redundant security, and my stomach dropped because redundant security means controlled space. My hands shook as I punched the code, and the keypad stayed dark. The captain slammed his shoulder into the gate, and it did not budge. My phone buzzed again, and when I yanked it out, the patrol app showed one last polite message. "Verification moved off-site," it read. "Proceed to the storm shelter." Storm shelter sat under the clubhouse. The scream returned, and it came from the ditch beside the road, muffled, rhythmic, like someone trapped and breathing through plastic. The sound made my skin crawl because it matched the earlier breathing. The captain grabbed my sleeve, eyes wide. "Do not look," he whispered, and fear made his voice small. "It uses empathy." My flashlight beam had already dipped toward the ditch. Reflex, and in the beam I saw something pale under the weeds. Not a body, a face. The older resident's face, eyes open, mouth moving. She mouthed my name. My jaw clenched shut hard enough to ache, and tears stung my eyes because the urge to answer felt like drowning. A thought hit, cold and sharp, and it felt like the final confession line forming in my throat. Obeying the rules had not saved anyone. Obedience had fed it. I did what doomed me, and I hate that admitting it feels like relief. I followed the rule. That is what marked me. The captain beside me made a choking sound, and his hand tightened on my sleeve. "We cannot," he whispered. "We cannot." The service road behind us filled with a soft rolling sound like wheels on gravel, and headlights flared. Not from the woman's car, from a different vehicle, a white van with no markings. The van moved slow, confident, like it belonged. The volunteer captain stepped out of the van's passenger side, binder tucked under his arm again. He waved like a neighbor greeting a neighbor. "Debrief off-site," he called, cheerful again. "Everyone stays calm." The van's rear doors opened and darkness spilled out, thick and warm like the rec center hallway had been. The captain beside me swallowed hard and his eyes met mine, and in that look I saw something like apology and resignation. He whispered, "If they take one of us, it should be me." And his voice broke because duty does that. "I started this." "I started it too," I whispered back, and my throat hurt because guilt loves company. The captain shoved his flashlight into my hand and pushed me backward toward the ditch. Toward the weeds, not toward the face, toward the narrow strip of darkness beyond the pole camera coverage. "Run," he hissed. "Get the record out. Get the warning out." My feet moved, and shame burned because leaving him felt like betrayal, but my mind latched onto the woman recording, the email I had sent, the paper warning, the fact that escape could become warning rather than survival. The volunteer captain called my name again, in my own voice, and my stomach lurched because it sounded too close. I ran anyway. The ditch grabbed at my boots with wet weeds, and my knees hit mud, and cold soaked through my pants, and that physical discomfort grounded me in a way fear could not. I crawled through the weeds, keeping my head low, because my body knew pole cameras love upright targets. Behind me, the van doors slammed, and the scream stopped, and the sudden absence of it felt like a threat. The pole camera red light blinked once, then went steady. A muffled voice rose from the van, and for a second I could not tell whose voice it was, and then I recognized the captain's voice, strained, calling out a phrase with bitter humor in it, like he wanted to spit the rule back at the system. "Keep walking, eyes down." Hearing him say it broke me because it sounded like surrender. I crawled until the weeds thinned and the service road noise faded. And when I finally stood, my legs shook so hard I had to lean on a fence post. My phone showed 1 bar of service again, real this time, and the screen displayed a sent confirmation for the earlier recording. A notification popped up from my email app, and my stomach dropped because the sender name looked like the HOA, but the address line showed nothing but a string of numbers and letters that did not match any domain. The subject line read, in that polite font, "Neighborhood Watch Update R4, Record Keeper Assignment." My thumb hovered over it, and dread clenched my throat because opening it felt like letting it into my head again. I opened it anyway because hiding does not repair anything, and because warning requires knowing. The email body contained 1 quoted line and nothing else, like a final rule. It said, "If you leave the environment, you carry it. You become the recorder." Below that, a file attachment icon sat, and the attachment name matched the folder path segment I had seen earlier on the camera grid. Training Sucset. My hands shook so hard the phone nearly slipped, and my gut twisted because the fridge horror clicked into place with a concrete detail that made the whole night reframe. The radio on my shoulder crackled softly, and I realized it had never been powered on. The battery seal strip still covered its contacts,